This conference will now be recorded.
Thank you, Commissioner Morgan. Good evening, everyone. This public hearing is now officially resumed. Thank you, everyone, for attending. I would note that I do have some preliminary information to cover. For those of you who have been in attendance at the prior three, or any one of the prior three hearings, some of this will sound familiar, but I would note that much of what I'm going to say is going to be abbreviated as compared to prior hearings because of the point of proceedings that we are at tonight, what has happened already and what is left yet to occur. Should the proceeding go this long, at roughly 2 hours in this proceeding, President Morgan will call a 10-minute recess, a break for everyone to have a breather. As everyone no doubt knows, the purpose of this meeting, this hearing, is for the Board of Commissioners to review the conditional use application and request for conditional use approval filed by E&B Hotel Partnership LP for a project that's been referred to as Premier Center Luxury Apartments. I would note for the purposes of the record that the legal requirements of the Municipalities Planning Code, First Class Township Code, and the Sunshine Act have been met with respect to this hearing. The hearing notice has been duly published in the newspaper, Department Press. The property has been duly posted, and the notice has been mailed to persons who are located in the vicinity of this property as required by ordinance. In addition, there have been other mail notices in accordance with protocol set forth at prior hearings. In addition, I would note that beyond the public requirements of the law, the township has posted information on its website and social media. As noted by interim manager Randy Cope, this also is a meeting in which the go-to-meeting format for a virtual presence is being facilitated by the township. I would note that the rules read by Mr. Cope a moment ago are really the rules that apply to any public meeting in South Whitehall. But I will note that, as you may recall, for those of you that were in attendance at prior meetings, the hearing proceeded along a certain path, and at the last hearing, the opportunity for public comment was given to residents who wished to participate. Continuing on, you may recall at the last hearing, Mr. Peter Terry of Benchmark Engineering testified as an expert witness called by Attorney Corkery, representing several objectors to this project. In excess of 20 residents testified, providing public comment, and matters ended on September 23rd with the conclusion of testimony by residents. And tonight we're here to hear the applicant's rebuttal evidence, rebuttal testimony. At the conclusion of this evening's proceeding, there will be, at a future hearing, October 25th, an opportunity for legal counsel for the applicant and legal counsel for the objectors, Mr. Corkery, to provide oral argument. That oral argument will not occur this evening, but as I said, it will occur on the 25th of October. Following oral argument, the board will have an opportunity for deliberations. Those deliberations will be a private executive session, not open to the public. At this point, it's undetermined how many executive sessions will be necessary to accomplish that, so the board may properly consider the information that's been presented over the course of these several meetings. But at the conclusion of the board's deliberations, there will be at a public meeting, whether it be a regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners or a special meeting called for that purpose, there will be a public vote on the conditional use application. And following a public vote, there will subsequently be a written decision issued. I would note for the record that tonight we have 3 additional board exhibits, which I have pre-marked, and absent any objection, they'll be considered admitted and part of the record. Exhibit B22 is the legal notice for this evening. 23 is a certification of mailing, and B24 is a certification of property posting. I would note that so far in the proceedings for this hearing, which occurred in June, August, and September, there are quite a few exhibits that have been marked. Board exhibits B1 through B21 and now through 24 have been admitted, excepting only B17, which was not admitted, and B18, which is not used. It was withdrawn, it's therefore reserved. I would note that the objectors to Mr. Corkery and his witnesses have submitted exhibits C1 through C6, and all have been admitted except for 2. C3 has not been admitted, and C2 is still pending a ruling. I would note that exhibits A1 through A19 of the applicant have been admitted. I noted a moment ago that exhibit C2 is awaiting the ruling. That was the PowerPoint presentation which Mr. Carrolley presented. I would note for the record that the board understands that Mr. Carrolley did not present what would be known as an expert report, and he did not testify as an expert in traffic or engineering. The applicant is being provided with an opportunity this evening for rebuttal testimony, rebuttal evidence in response to Mr. Carrolley, in response to Mr. Terry. I would at this point note that the withholding of a ruling on this particular exhibit was deferred until such time as we've got to this point of proceeding. So now I will ask Mr. Preston, is there still an objection to the admission of that exhibit?
Not with the, this is it, there we go, not with the clarification that you've provided as to the nature of the testimony supporting that.
Understood. Yeah. So exhibit C2 is admitted with that caveat that I mentioned a moment ago, that it's not considered to be an expert report. I've already alluded to it, but I'll just mention in case it's forgotten as we get through things toward the end. When we conclude our proceedings this evening, the meeting will be continued, the hearing will be continued until the 25th of October here in this meeting room at 6 p.m. And that will be for the purpose of oral argument. Yes, sir.
What was C3?
C3 was that document that Mr. Carrolley had characterized as a treatise. That professor has written an article.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. President Morgan.
All right. Thank you, Attorney Zader. Thank you, Attorney Zader. So at this point, I believe we would hand things over to Attorney Preston.
Okay. Thank you and good evening. And again, thank you for the opportunity to hopefully, we believe, clear up a few things. For the purpose of whoever is operating the AV equipment, we're going to be dealing with our exhibits 17, 18, and 19. And we're probably going to be doing it in that order. I hope to move through this fairly quickly. I don't think there's a whole lot that we need to be concerned with here. I'm going to call as my first witness, Mr. Seth Shapiro. Seth, are you ready to go?
Yes.
You want to work from there?
It's probably easier to mic. Sure. And you won't have to share.
And this would be Exhibit 17. Okay. You got it. We'll give it a second. And Seth, you understand you're still under oath and test.
Good, is it working? Yeah. Oh, it's the whole packet.
That's why it's taking so long.
Okay, while we have a roll in the actions, please just identify yourself again for those who may not have been here at the first hearing. You're a planner, is that correct?
Yes, my name is Scott Schicker. I'm a principal at Barton Partners Architects Planners, Inc. I am the Director of Planning and Urban Design for that firm, as well as a principal trained as an architect and a planner.
The testimony and some of the evidence presented by the objectors made it appear as if this particular project proposal that's before the board this evening was perhaps being plopped into the middle of a residential neighborhood. Do you recall that?
I do.
And we have an exhibit here, Exhibit A17. You have an opinion as to whether or not this particular project has been plopped in a residential neighborhood, do you not?
I do.
Why don't you just take a moment before we get to that opinion to tell us about the conditions on the ground with reference to A17?
Sure. Well, actually, A17 actually shows the proposal in context. But the existing conditions, as everyone here, I believe, is aware, is a motel and conference center. And actually, you can see a pretty defined land use, I don't want to say barrier, but a land use line where it goes from a single-family detached neighborhood to sort of commercial uses between that single-family neighborhood and what is our limit, for lack of a better term, limited access highways and the cloverleaf.
And what are some of the uses? In other words, I'm trying to get to whether or not, you can tell me if I'm correct, there's sort of two extremes here that we need to transition between. Can you point that out?
Yeah, so some of the uses, I believe there's a Chabad center there. There's I think an auto body shop that's also there. I know on the right side, on the other side of Cracker Sport Road from the neighborhood, there's a garden center. Actually having a little trouble. Is there a way to blow this up a little bit? It's a little blurry. Perfect. So you can also see that there's actually a couple auto body places, a remote parking lot. I'm not sure what the first one is. It's like some kind of cultural center. But all of those sort of serve as this buffer area between the single family neighborhood and both 309 and 202.
So the single family neighborhood that everyone's speaking about only touches one side of the proposed development, is that correct?
That's correct.
Now, how does the proposed development function, if it does, as a transition zone? Are there gradients within the development?
There are gradients, and we actually, when we first looked at laying this out, that was one of the sort of the guiding principles. We knew that we wanted to put, and actually the ordinance also permits this, or actually requires this. We wanted to put sort of a lower intensity use along Cracker Sport Road, facing single family, and then stepping up and going higher the further back and the closer one got to highway. And actually the grade also tends to drop off there as well, which will further mitigate the taller buildings. So along Cracker Sport Road, we have these 3-story townhomes, which is, sort of the next transition from single family detached, and you go to townhouses. Then we go to elevator served buildings the closer you get to the highway.
Okay, and this is all pursuant to an overlay zone that was enacted by the township, is that correct?
That is correct.
And if a township, hypothetical here, but if a township wanted to zone a property such as this, located such as this, would the residential overlay zone established by South Whitehall be an appropriate zoning classification, in your opinion, as a professional?
It absolutely would, yeah.
I have no further questions.
Do the board have any questions?
Any questions from the board? I don't think so.
No questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Taylor, do you have? Mr. Corker, you have any questions?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I said no. I guess you didn't. Thank you. Sorry.
Okay, very good. I'd like to call Kevin Markle as my next witness. This will be, the next exhibit will be, well, you can just leave that one up there for now. Just, if you would, just blow up. Yeah, let's take it closer into the proposed development. And Kevin, again, for those who may not be familiar, may not, some people may not have been at all of these hearings, just identify yourself briefly.
My name is Kevin Markle. I'm a senior project engineer with Barry Isaac and Associates. We're doing the potential land development for the site.
So you handle the engineering.
Correct.
Right, and you've been present at all these hearings,
Yes, I have.
and you've heard that there were some concerns from the objectors about the number of entryways or access points to this particular project, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in particular, I believe there was some objection to there being more than one.
Yes.
Can you address that concern? if you would?
Sure. From a site engineering and site planning perspective, a property of this size, it is generally good practice to have multiple accesses if you're able to, and the property configuration does, for a multitude of reasons. Primarily, from a site safety and access perspective for first responders, as well as the residents, the users of the facility. For instance, if the main entranceway was blocked from a vehicle accident, a broken down vehicle, a street repair, utility repair, sinkhole, the second access allows first responders to still get into the site, allows users of the site to still get in and out of the site freely without any impacts.
So in your opinion, the second access is not only a good idea, but a single access is probably a bad idea?
In my professional opinion.
Okay, no further questions.
Any questions from the board? Any questions, Mr. Corker?
I'm going to call Rob Hoffman. And for this, we're going to, let's see, let's start with 18 and then we'll go to 19. And Rob, just as before, if you just quickly, who are you for the people that might not have been here?
Sure. Rob Hoffman with Traffic Planning and Design, licensed professional engineer, traffic consultant for the project.
And you've been at all the hearings?
I have.
And again, you understand you're under oath, testifying under oath?
Yes.
Okay, what, Mr. Hoffman, what is it, what's a collector road?
So a collector road is that's a designation that's given to roadways. The collector does just as the name says, it collects traffic. And I might actually read the definition directly from the Township SWT 312, section 312-6. Collector road is a street or road designed to carry vehicular traffic between one or more residential or non-residential areas and a major system of arterial streets and highways, or from one part of the municipality to another part of the same municipality. And that's the definition.
So that sounds as if a collector road is expected to have some volume of traffic.
It is. The collector road collects just that, collects traffic from lower hierarchy roads and streets into higher.
Are there any collector roads proximate to this proposed development?
There are. Ridgeview Drive is a collector road, Bulldog Drive is a collector road, Crackersport Road is a collector road, and Winchester is a collector road, and those are all on the map.
Yeah, let's break that down a little bit. So are they the red lines?
They are the red lines.
And so we see the green, the light green area, which is the proposal, right?
That's correct.
And you mentioned Bulldog Drive, right?
Yes.
That's the one that runs down along 309.
That would be correct.
And that seems to terminate at the proposed site, is that correct?
It does, yes.
And then what's the one that wraps around the top of the site?
That's Crackersport Road.
And that too is a collector road?
That is a collector
And
road.
then the one that comes down and tees into Crackersport, what is that?
That's Winchester.
You've heard a lot about Winchester Drive and what happens on Winchester Drive. Is that also a collector road?
That is, yes.
Now, the objectors had questions about with respect to the traffic study that you performed. They had questions about the choice of locations studied and not studied, assumptions underlying background growth, and other assumptions underlying your analysis. Do you recall that?
I do.
I want to start with locations. So the locations that you studied, the intersections and so forth, that you studied in your traffic study, how were those locations determined?
Those locations are determined by myself as the traffic consultant for the project. Originally develops a scope with the intersections that we think are appropriate for a study area for the project of a certain magnitude such as this. Those are then shared with the township engineer. Township engineer reviews that, and then they provide input, and they either agree with that scope or they will add additional intersections to that scope.
So they have the ability to modify that and amend that.
Absolutely.
In fact, the traffic study is based on a mutual agreement between engineers for the developer, for the township, is that correct?
That's correct.
What about the assumptions as to background growth? Same question, how were those assumptions made?
Again, it's the same premise where there's a general background growth that's applied to the traffic volumes. And then in addition to that, you look at potential proposed developments within the area. So same exact process where my firm would develop scope that would include the growth rate that we're going to use, the nearby developments that are going to be included, that's shared with the township engineer. They review that and then they either concur or they add additional developments.
Okay, and we heard something about the Schnecksville warehouse. In fact, we heard quite a bit about that. That was not included in the scoping.
That was not included with our original scope, and it also was not included with the additional developments that the township engineer suggested be included in the study.
Very good. Now, the Schnecksville warehouse, you know what that is.
Yeah.
Is there, has anyone described to you any aspect of the Schnecksville warehouse that would cause you to believe that it generates some unusual traffic pattern?
No.
Hours, the hours during which the study is conducted, same question. How are the hours determined that really during which the study was conducted?
Again, very similar answer. We will determine the hours, which are typically the peak hours of the roadway, the rush hour peak hours of the roadway. Make that recommendation in the scope. The scope is shared with the township engineer. They look at it, and then he will provide feedback if they think any feedback is necessary relative to that scope.
So at the end of the day, you're not the solely responsible for these decisions, isn't that correct?
That's right.
There was some talk about a black box. You got some information out of a black box. You remember that?
I do.
Do you have any idea what that black box is?
The black box, I believe, was referring to the Synchro software, which is one of the capacity analysis softwares that are used to perform the analyses of the various intersections and stuff.
But that, and is that authoritative? Is that used by other state agencies and so forth?
It is, my opinion is, that was an unfair description of that software. That software is an industry-wide recognized software program. It's accepted by Pennsylvania Department of Transportation, New Jersey Department of Transportation, Delaware Department of Transportation, both Carolina Department of Transportations, and I can pretty much assure you, but I can't swear to it, probably every Department of Transportation. Okay, so the ones I cited, I know for a fact because I have experience working in those states and with those departments of transportation that they accept it. So and not only that, it is, as I said, an industry-wide accepted software package supported.
So regardless of the insinuations of the black box, your conclusions are based on science, is that correct?
Absolutely.
You don't use chicken entrails or dry bones or anything like that? Now I want to take a look at the next exhibit, which is 19. We want to put that one up. And while they're getting that oriented and up to size, so it's legible. Mr. Hoffman, you know Exhibit 19 is that correct?
I do, yeah.
And what is Exhibit 19?
Exhibit 19 is an exhibit that looked at various by right options that could be injected on this site.
Okay. And then at the very bottom, in fact, there were two exhibits admitted. One did not have option 5. This one does have option 5. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what is option 5? What does that bring to the table?
Option 5 brings to the table what currently exists on the site, which is the hotel and conference center.
Okay, now we had some testimony about what actually goes on at the hotel and the conference center. You recall that?
I did.
You based yours on the assumption that your traffic counts, I should say, your analysis on the assumption that there are 285 rooms available in the existing hotel. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Are there 285 rooms available in the existing hotel?
Correct.
Are you aware of any prohibition against renting all 285 rooms at any one time?
I am not.
I also see up there that you based your analysis on the assumption that the conference center has 1,200 seats. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Does the conference center have 1,200 seats?
Yes, it does.
And are you aware of any prohibition against occupying all 1,200 seats at any one time?
No.
No further questions. Board, any questions? Mr. Corkery.
I have just a few. How do I go?
You can go up there. You can come up
Okay, it's
here.
gonna use that one.
I have just a few questions on the beginning segment of yours with the roads. The location study. You also heard Mr. Terry indicate that in his opinion, professional opinion, once that intersection with Ridgeview Bulldog is a total failure, that there should have then been more of a study on the roads that intersect with Winchester. I take it you disagree with that?
I do, because I feel that the way our study was done looks at the worst case scenario. So if I can take traffic away from that intersection and tell you it's going to operate better.
No, but his point was you should have, in his opinion, done an extended or additional traffic study on the various roads that intersect Winchester. But you never did that.
Study roads that intersect Winchester?
Those intersections.
Yeah, I disagree with that. We did study roads intersections along Winchester.
Well, all the ones that he mentioned in your drawing, other than Winchester out at the other ones, all the individual ones going through. You must remember all the names they gave you.
I honestly don't recall him naming every intersection along Winchester. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, as soon as you get into Winchester and you start to perceive, there are various intersections.
Right.
None of those were analyzed, right?
They were not?
So you disagree that, with his opinion, what I remember was those should have been done after your traffic study showed that Ridgeview and Bulldog was a disaster.
I don't know that he said that.
Well, he said it failed.
I don't know that he said every intersection along Winchester should be studied.
Okay, I guess we'll just let it to the board to what they remember. Once that intersection, Ridgeview and Bulldog, quote, failed, did you go back to the township engineer and say, ask him if you should do other intersections?
I did not.
Now, with regard to the second issue you had with the Schnecksville warehouse, you said that wouldn't have affected anything other than a normal traffic. Is that your position?
I didn't say that it wouldn't have affected anything.
Okay, but you didn't think the Schnecksville warehouse should have been factored in at all?
There was nothing unusual about the traffic associated with the Schnecksville warehouse.
Except that there would be a lot of traffic coming from there. There's a field and now you have a warehouse.
That's your opinion, and
Okay.
it's going to be a lot of traffic.
Well, I think most of the members here that live in the community know that Route 100, which comes to warehouses, have a lot of traffic. Okay, no, that was the board that can take judicial notice of that. So you don't think warehouses generate traffic?
Okay, time out. Point is understood, Mr. President, and Mr. Clerk, what you just mentioned is appropriate for argument next week.
Okay. Do you think warehouses generate traffic?
They do.
And you didn't think it was worthwhile to figure that out?
Figure what out?
the effect it would have on this. Are you following these proceedings at all?
I am on these proceedings, and I can also tell you that it is not typical, just because there's another development in some adjacent municipality, to have to include that in the traffic study.
You consider warehouses just another development.
Yes,
The hours for the study, there were questions about, because of the school and garden centers and other things, about picking hours to do your study. Do you have any opinion on that? What Mr. Terry said about
again, the scope of the study was based on an industry standard practice, which is to study the peak hours. And that scope was vetted with the township engineer. And they agreed with the scope and the hours that were studied.
it? It was just an industry standard. It had nothing to do with what is in the surrounding area. Just an industry standard.
The industry standard takes into account, when you're looking at the roadway volumes, what the peak periods are. Generally, you're going to study the highest volume period.
But if you don't know what's in the surrounding area, how do you know? If there's a high school, a grade school, and something else, obviously the peak hour of traffic is going to be different than if you got a rural road. Wouldn't you think?
Not necessarily.
Can we, I just ask that everybody please be respectful. I know there's a motion in the room, but it's very important that we give everybody the opportunity to talk without the comments coming from anywhere. So please.
And your last thought, I believe, was with the showing option 5 with the existing hotel conference center. Did you ever check? There's no problem with the existing facility at the present time, correct?
No problem, meaning with respect to,
I mean, there's no traffic congestion, there's no anything. You're saying, oh, it has 285 rooms, 1,200 seats. None of that presents a problem right now, correct? I mean, what's the point of you saying in option 5, oh, look at this thing? Well, it generates no traffic. I mean, did you ever go out there and look at the place?
yeah, absolutely.
Did you ever see any vehicles coming out from 285 rooms? Do you know if any of the rooms are even inhabitable? Did you ever go ask the hotel?
There are 285 rooms at that facility. And there's a 1,200 seat conference center.
And that's it? You don't know if
That's
they're
it.
functional or anything else? Because you never went into the building?
I never went to,
Never asked the owner or anything like that? Okay. I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Preston, any redirect?
Mr. Hoffman, you've looked at, you've done traffic analysis and parking counts in large part for uses that have not yet come online, isn't that correct?
correct.
And when you're tasked with determining, for example, let's take a parking count for a shopping center. Parking counts are often based on square footages, is that correct? Retail?
That's correct.
And then an additional for a certain number of employees, isn't that correct?
Sure, yep.
And you need to have that number of parking spaces.
That's correct. Correct.
You don't get to come in and say, well, we don't think it's going to be fully leased up. Is that correct?
We do not have that option.
So you're required to take into account what that facility is designed for, the capacity that it's designed for. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Isn't that true with a hotel? If a hotel has 285 rooms in it, aren't you required to take into account the potential that it would have 285 rooms rented,
Yes,
regardless of whether it does or not?
yes, that's correct.
And are you aware of, as I asked you, for any prohibition that would limit the number of units in that 285 room hotel that could be leased by law?
I am not.
Are you aware of any prohibition by law that would limit the number of seats in that auditorium that can be sat in?
I am not.
I have no further
Mr. Corkery?
I had forgotten just one question, if I could ask them. They're not in response to that. I believe when we went through with the black box one, was the other one I didn't go down. You said all these states that it's utilized in, correct? And that you've had direct dealings with all those?
Correct.
Does your firm basically just do developers' work? Traffic studies for developers?
No, not at all.
And how would you get all those states to be in them?
How would we get all those?
How would you have gone and done traffic studies on all those if they weren't for developers? Were you representing municipalities?
I do work for both private sector and public sector.
All right, I don't have any.
Does the board have any questions?
No.
Mr. President?
Nothing. I have no further questions from Mr. Hoffman and no further witnesses.
Understood. Anything further from the board?
No questions from the board?
Then consistent with the protocol that's been previously established, this matter is continued until next Monday, the 25th of October at 6 p.m. here in this room. I'll turn it over to President Wood.
Thank you, Attorney Zager.
That being said, we do have the opportunity, as our agenda does read, for courtesy of the board. This is on a non-agenda item though, unrelated to this hearing. So is there anybody for courtesy of the floor on a non-agenda item? Anything in the chat?
Nothing in the chat.
We have no executive session planned for this evening, so I do need a motion to adjourn. We have a motion on the floor from Commissioner Kelly. Can I have a second? Second from Commissioner Stetton. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Could you just tell everybody, if you know, where's the next meeting going to be? Is it here? Okay.
Yes.
Maybe if that's 6 p.m.
The next meeting, as described, will be here at 6 p.m. on October 25th. Have a good evening, everyone.
I'm used to getting out of this.